The other day, I did a video where I argued that one of the ways to be effective and productive is to take the work that you're doing and amplify it and really leverage it. And so I gave the example, and I really underscored the importance of getting into the mindset where anytime you're writing, to write with the intention of publishing it and basically taking that written content and turning it into other things. And I argued that that's something you can do with all your coursework and papers and so forth, where there is a heavy writing component. Now, I did that video in sort of general terms, and it was a video that was applicable really to anyone who's doing writing. But I want to now hone in a little bit and really focus that conversation and discussion on law school admissions specifically. So hopefully with the last video now you're in the mindset and thinking about how you can take all the writing you've done and get it out there. But I think that obviously not, even if you're taking your writing and publishing it, not all publications are equal from the standpoint of law school admissions. So I want to answer here and talk about what are the forms of publication that are really going to add value to you and strengthen your application to top law schools? Like what are the different ways you can publish your work that are and be proactive about it in a way that will really get you the most upside in law school admissions? So one of the things to keep in mind and constantly remember is the fact that your major target audience, especially for the top law schools, is law professors. They're the ones who are going to be reading your applications and making a determination, obviously alongside the admissions office themselves. And it's important to keep in mind what are the things that law school professors, what kind of writing do they really respect? Do they resonate with? What kind of writing signals to them that you really have the capacity to be a good, not only a law student, but also someone who ultimately will make an impact on the legal profession? And I would argue that there are three big kinds of writing that I think will get you, that will make an impact. So number one is articles that are published in law reviews. And this is obviously what makes or breaks a career for people who go into legal academia, at least until the point where they get tenure. The way they show that they can make a contribution to the legal field is by publishing in law reviews. Now, you might think that getting into a law review is something that, it's a very difficult thing or advanced thing to do. It's not something you can do until you're in law school or beyond. But that's actually not true, that there are different ways that you can get your work published in law reviews. And the biggest way to do this is to be writing things that are quality enough that conform to basically what law reviews are looking for. So it's a different kind of writing, something that you can get used to. But I think the first step, obviously, is to think about what kind of work can you be producing that generally would even be in contention for appearing in a law review. And the way to think about that is, I think the process will begin, one, in course selection. So if you can find different courses that have a paper requirement and where you'll have the opportunity to write about issues at the intersection of law and whatever the course is, that's obviously going to give you an opportunity to write about legal issues. Now, the other thing, obviously, is to try to, whether it's in the course selection process or whether it's in the context of finding mentors or finding professors who you want to work with, find people who are writing in law reviews. And so the easiest way, I think, to do this is that pretty much at any major undergraduate university, you'll usually have professors who have a law degree and who are publishing law reviews. So often these are people who are teaching, who have a law school appointment but are teaching a class that's open to undergraduates. or maybe they're people who are um, who are teaching at the undergrad level and are in a certain department, but their interest and their expertise is legal in nature. And if you can get to know these professors and talk to them about either getting their guidance on taking the paper you've done and getting it up to the quality of being in a law review, or you can even be a collaborator and find a way to co-author a paper with a professor. I think that these are opportunities that are available. This is something that you can do. So I would definitely urge you to think about finding ways to get into law reviews. Now, obviously, in terms of generating ideas for what law reviews are looking for, this is going to require some legwork on your end. I think obviously talking to law professors or people who are writing in law reviews, they'll obviously be well positioned to give you advice. But especially if you have an area where you want to focus and write about, it's not very difficult to find out what are the major law journals, law reviews that focus on those issues, and just get into the habit of browsing, getting a subscription and browsing through these, and you'll, just by reading, get a feel. One thing that you'll notice when you look at law reviews is that the note section of a law review. So there are like the main articles, but then there's a section in these law reviews that are notes. These are usually just shorter kind of writings or sections, and these are sections of the law journal that often do publish work by students. So when you look at like people who are in law school, how do they break into legal publishing? Often they do that by writing a note. An piece of advice that I got from my small group professor in law school when he was telling us giving us advice on how to publish, he said that write about things that are really cutting edge, that are really in the news, and that way you're not dealing with as much competition. So if you write about like some major issue in the Warren Court, I mean, you're competing now with many decades of law professors, especially because that's the kind of issue that might be of interest to legal academics. But if there's an upcoming court case, or there's some issue in the news right now, or maybe there's some like technological issue that you can comment on, the things that are really current that not too many people have written about, that presents an obvious opportunity to be able to write. So number one is definitely think about ways that you can get published in law reviews, law journals. I'll make one more note here, and this is something that I did. There are a handful of publications that are modeled off of law journals, but they really specialize in publishing the work of undergraduates. So definitely look into some of those, and that's a relatively easy way to break in compared to the more rigorous law review process. Number two is books, and I think writing a book and publishing a book, especially from a reputable publisher, is really something that can make an impact. And the good news is that it's very doable if you're strategic about your course selection, and you figure out like some kind of a theme, some kind of a topic that you write about, and then you find courses, or you line up independent studies, or you find whatever opportunity that you can to write about the subject. And just by like really being strategic and writing about certain themes or concepts or whatever, a lot of the book writing you can just get done through your coursework. And that becomes especially easy to do if you also decide to write a thesis at some point, where if you approach a thesis with the idea that you want to turn it into a book, again, a lot of the work can be done. Now, the important thing when you're thinking about writing a book is that you have to get going on that process very early on to make sure that it gets published by the time you're applying to law school. Because the reality when you write a book is that actually writing the thing is really only a relatively small percentage of the entire process. You also have to line up an agent, you have to do a proposal, you have to close a book deal, and then there's going to be a lag between the time that you actually write the book and when the thing gets published. Um, and so obviously, you want to try to the degree possible, find either an academic publisher or find a reputable, popular publisher. And I think really what law schools and law professors are going to judge you on. Obviously, it'll be the quality of your book, but a big indicator or signal of the quality of the book is the publisher that you have. So writing a book is definitely worth doing, but you'll have to get going fairly early on in the process. And then number 3 is writing op-eds and blog posts. And here the challenge is a little bit different from either the law review, law journal route or the book route, where on the one hand it's much easier to do. So especially now with all different reputable online publications, there's a much higher demand for quality content and shorter form things, and so getting published is actually relatively easy. The thing to think about here is how do you it still is time intensive, because not only do you have to write to sufficient quality, but the placement process, like communicating with editors, getting things published, is actually more time consuming and difficult than it might sound. But even beyond that, the other problem you run into is that even if you are publishing on a regular basis, the challenge becomes how do you'll get different benefits from publishing in the form of feedback and networking, which I talked about in the other video. But then the question you have to think about is, even if you are publishing prolifically in op-eds, blog posts, etc., how do you take what you're doing and create a credential out of it that will resonate in law school admissions? And here, what I think that you want to think about is you want to, first of all, here you need a